عند الباب بده يطلع يلا بسرعة وقت اطلعوا بسرعة وقت
Well, the time we were in Aleppo was about a year ago or more, when it was still pretty permissive to work in there. You could more or less move around freely without any risk of being abducted by Islamists, which there is definitely now. But people didn't really know where the front lines were. It was generally chaotic and pretty much punctuated all day long with the sound of shelling or jets flying in to hit civilian areas. It's that sound that terrifies ordinary residents of Aleppo daily. Jets coming in low overhead and never knowing really until you hear the blast exactly what their target is. One morning I was just speaking on a satellite phone for a couple of minutes, and the helicopter started swirling around us. We didn't quite know why that was. Shortly afterwards, the helicopter fired a missile into some nearby buildings, and it was a house of a family who were sort of all asleep at the time of the actual strike.
They say the airstrike came in about 4 hours ago, but still they're racing frantically to pull what they say are 9 people still stuck under that rubble, including a father and child.
I think the thing which stuck with all of us most was the child who was born less than a year old, who was sheltered by his mother's body. The mother was killed, but he was breastfeeding at the time and was able to be pulled out alive from the rubble.
God is great, he says. Bashar is a dog. God willing, he'll witness Bashar's death.
Ricardo Garcia Villanova, the cameraman who was working with us, shot this remarkable image of him lying on a hospital table and being cleaned down of the dust of the house where he'd lived for not very long.
A year old, he was born into Syria's bloody revolution and may yet survive it still.
One of the stories we did was principally about a street in the old city. And basically these were children who had very little idea what they were doing, had very little discipline with the weapons they had. On a number of occasions had made these homemade bombs. I recall us finding a basement we wanted to shelter in near their position. It looked like the perfect place to avoid an airstrike, and I pointed out a large gas tank in there and asked them what was that, and it was basically a huge homemade bomb which would have been big enough to take out the entire building we were sat in, but they put it in that basement because they thought it was a safe place for that kind of explosion.
This is an anti-aircraft gun. They seem to prefer noise to accuracy.
It was a very ramshackle group. There were about 2 older men trying to run them, and then every once in a while a more radical commander would come in and come up with a plan which they wouldn't be able to implement, and then they'd be stuck in stasis again. And this was just simply at the beginning of the fight for Aleppo, when you thought they'd have had the energy and the resolve, but it just slowly broke into this stalemate, which is now evident in place, where there are pockets of regime forces there that have no real pressure upon them that's ever going to force them to leave.
They run forwards to fire a rocket-propelled grenade. There's too much smoke to know what they hit. More a game here than a fight to the death. But this is a city of millions, torn apart by every pitched battle for every 100 feet.
I think the feeling we all felt by about 4 or 5 days filming the same events in Aleppo, about a 2-week period inside Syria, was that we'd really filmed as much as we could at that time, and the luck that we would experience so far was perhaps coming to an end, and it was time to move out. And the feeling of relief, I think, heading towards the border was quite extreme for lots of us.